Hi, and welcome to So Many Books, So Little Time podcast. My name is Jody Stapler. I'm an owner of a publishing company called Willow Moon Publishing, a podcaster, a voiceover artist, and an author. Stories are so important in our lives, and there are so many out there from independent authors and independent publishing companies that we may never find unless we trip over them on accident. So I started this podcast for people who love books and love to read, and to help bring more awareness to the indie books and authors of our time. So stay with me for So Many Books, So Little Time. We are speaking with Eugenia Kim. She is a professor at Fairfield University, and she is the author of The Calligrapher's Daughter and the new book, The Kinship of Secrets. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
The Kinship of Secrets, it's a great book. It is starts out in 1948, Korea, just as the Korean War and all the politics are starting to happen, and then flows through, extending into the 60s. Can you tell us a little bit more about the book and the characters?
So it's based on a family story about my sister. And it's the fictionalized novel is a story of two girls separated by war and circumstances for 15 years. These are sisters, and one family is in America, the daughter Miran with her parents, and the other daughter, Inja, is left behind in Seoul, Korea, because the grandmother whom they lived with was very upset when they left to visit America, saying that they would never return. And so, as a guarantee of sorts, the mother and the father decide to leave one daughter behind to prove that they were intending to come back and that they were coming back indeed. And since Miran was a year older, she was old enough to know better that she was being left behind. So they left the infant behind at 1 year old, who wouldn't enjoy the trip being that young, and also who wouldn't remember that she had been abandoned basically for a year, because they only planned to travel in America for a year, maybe two at the most, earn money, come back, and start a school.
Right. And this was common back then, right?
It wasn't, well, it was unusual for my father, not my father, it is my father. So
That's okay. That's great.
Sum up. Well, I will talk about the family story because it is so closely related to the novel. He came back to Korea. He had been separated from his wife for 9 years because of the Pacific War and other circumstances because of the Japanese occupation of Korea. So when he came back in 1945, it was as a civilian translator for the U.S. Army. So he was a field officer, and as a result of that, he had special privileges in Korea. And when his job ended, American Transport was willing to send him to America. They were able to leave Korea because his papers were such that it was possible. Otherwise, it would have been impossible.
Okay.
Very few Koreans were immigrating at that time, either because it was post-war and everyone was poor, or just because of immigration law.
Right.
So he was fortunate to be able to have a travel visa and not a green card yet, but a travel visa to come to America. So that's why he wanted to bring his wife, because she had never seen America, and he felt guilty having been separated from her for so long, that he wanted to bring her to the U.S. And they had two children. They actually had 3 kids by then, but in the novel, it's 2 children.
Right. And the way that you have written the book is that it goes back and forth between the sister that is in America and the sister that is left in Korea.
Right.
And it's very interesting because you get to see how the family in America is trying to conform or become American, and you also get to see the life of the child in Korea and how what life was like for the families there.
Right.
I find it very interesting in the book is that Miran in America, she has the things, she has the money, she has, yes, she's very uncomfortable and it's new, trying to assimilate into a new culture, but she doesn't have the connection with her mother and with her family that the sister in Korea has with her grandmother and her uncle. So even though she may not have the things, she has the emotional support in Korea.
Right.
Also, one I wanted to bring up, I thought this was the most charming little section in the beginning of the book. You mentioned how the mother is collecting a book full of little American sayings.
Right.
Like one in the bush is worth two in the hand and things like that.
Because they're crazy, when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how did you come up with that? Was that something that your family members did, or was that just something that you came up with?
No, so I was raised in that Korean household, and colloquialisms, American colloquialisms, were not part of our vocabulary. So when I married an American guy who was full of colloquialism, I only stood half of the things that he was talking about, and I found it
Yeah.
very amusing that he had to explain things to me like Katie barred the door, or I mean, I knew things like dog and pony show. Those are, things
Right.
in the vernacular, but certain things were just really bizarre, like your jaw dropping to the floor, things like that.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, and you don't even think about them when you're raised hearing them all the time, but when you point them out in the book, it was like, "Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a very strange saying."
Yes, it is. Yeah. And there were counterparts in Korea too. So I tried to include some of the proverbs, that are common in Korea as well, every now and then.
Right, right. So there's a deep family secrets in this book, but they're not being kept out of malice. The family they're keeping the secrets from each other to protect each other.
Yes.
And so often families do that, and then often it would probably be better if the secrets were put out there, and that's kind of how I feel like it is in this book.
That it would be better if the secret was known.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough thing. And even that whole notion that it would be better for the secrets to be known, even after years, is a question that this novel poses. I think, do you protect the person who doesn't know by keeping it a secret, because it's not only harmful to know the secret, but also the fact that it had been kept from her for so many years is harmful. So,
Right.
the chances are good that the secret will be revealed at some point, because secrets have a tendency just to let their ugly heads rear. But the fact of the matter is, that's the truth in my family, is that we kept that secret from my oldest sister until to this day, to this very day, she doesn't know that she was adopted.
Wow.
Yeah, and she, so the book came out, and it's like, of course she's going to find out now, but she's elderly and has cognitive disabilities, so she's not going to read the book, she's not going to read the press, she's just not going to know about it. So I felt like, because I started writing this 7 years ago, and at that time she was healthier, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? This is like her life story. Is it fair for me to use it? And then, but it's not really her story. It's Inja's story. It's my other sister's story, who came from Korea. So, so I decided that I would write it, and then if she did read it and was upset about it, then I would just use the cover of fiction to cover it up.
Yeah. Now, the sister in America, would you say that is you?
No, I would say it's a composite of 5 siblings.
Okay. Okay, very good.
Closer to me, because it mirrors my experience more readily than anyone else's.
Right. Okay. The thing about the story is that they intended to get her and go back to Korea in
Yeah.
like a year or two, but they end up not being able to send for Inja to come to America for 15 years.
Right.
And by the time she is ready to come to America, she doesn't want to leave.
Right. She's attached to her family in Korea, to her uncle who raised her.
Right. And the connection between the uncle and Inja is beautiful.
Okay.
And also with the grandmother.
Yes.
Very beautiful. Yes. And she misses that when she gets to America.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did Do you find that your sister that came to America had those same problems?
Yeah, well, so she's 6 years older than me. And so when we were growing up, we weren't that close. She came over when she was 11 and I was 5.
Okay.
So I fictionalized it in the novel to make her more older so that she could be more mature.
Right.
But so when we were growing up, I never really sort of talked to her about her arrival here or her immigration or anything. I mean, because she just arrived and she was a new sister and that was it. Kids don't sort of ask these questions. At least back then they didn't. And so it wasn't until even after college, I lived with her for a couple years, and I never even asked about this because it was something that happened so long ago by then, and also in a family that has secrets, you don't really dig. So
Right.
yeah, and by then I knew about the secret of my oldest sister. So it was only until we went to Korea together in 2005, my first trip there ever to research the calligrapher's daughter. And she accompanied me as a translator and as a cultural ambassador for my purposes, which was really, really
Oh,
great.
what an experience.
It was. And so I asked her then on a train ride, like, what was it like for you to come to America? Of course, I assumed that, like most immigrants, they're thrilled to come to America or they're looking forward to it or something. But she
Yeah.
said that was the blackest day of her life.
Wow.
And so that really intrigued me. And then she told me that for 2 years after she arrived, every night she dreamed of going back to Korea. So it was very traumatic for her. And I hadn't ever thought that it would be, nor had I known the depth of the trauma that she experienced until I began to research more and interview her about her life with Uncle and her life in Korea. And
Right.
so she had a full, happy, and not a rich life, but a satisfied life with her family there. She was very close to family.
Now, did she ever get to go back and see them as a teenager or in her 20s or anything like that?
It was in her late 20s that she was able to earn enough money to go back,
Oh, so just like the book.
just like the book. So, and then after that, she went, and then after she got married, she went back almost every year because her husband's business took him to Korea. So she was able to see him lots.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
It's a beautiful book. It's very heartwarming, and I think in this day and age where we do have so many issues in our politics in America with immigration and people that don't understand what people that are coming to our country are going through. It's a great read and a poignant read, um, and I hope people pick it up and read the wonderful story between these two sisters. You did a great job showing the difference in the cultures where Mirren was very little when she came to America. So she was basically raised as an American,
Yes.
and how different the life was for Inja, who grew up in a poor Korean household.
Yeah, post-war, and how she had suffered through war as well, and with her family, and survived, 3 years of the Korean War, being displaced from home, being war refugees in Busan.
Absolutely. And in fact, it's if anybody loves history or is interested in learning more about the Korean War, it's a very good way to get them started and interested.
Yeah, one of the gratifying things I hear from readers is something like, "Oh, my father was in the Korean War, but he never talked about it, so
Yeah,
I learned something from this novel about that," and that's just so gratifying to hear.
right. I think that, that's very common. My grandfather as well was in the Korean War. He will not speak about it.
Yeah,
You ask him any questions and he immediately shuts down. So it is one of those times in history where we don't know as much as we should.
right.
Not like World War I and World War II, where there's so many movies about it.
Yeah.
Korean War just doesn't have um, the communication out there for others to pick up and learn from.
Yeah, and and now the veterans are dying. They're in their
Yeah,
70s and 80s. Like you say, it's your grandfather. So it's like this is the time now to be able to talk about it, to allow them to talk about it as well. But it was a very brutal war, and depending on where you were located in the war, it was something that would be preferable to forget.
Right. No, definitely. I mean, the PTSD, of course, is well known today.
Yes,
But back then, when the soldiers were going back home to wherever country they were from, it was not as accepted that they went through this trauma.
that's right.
So I do think it is very important for people to find out more and really research, especially things like the Korean War. So
Right.
that I do appreciate that with this book that it it reminded me. I don't know as much about the Korean War as I should.
Right. And I didn't either when I started this novel. I knew very little. I knew probably as much as, anybody who was raised in a Korean household knows that it happened and what it was about, and that it never really ended. And so I knew those things, but I didn't know that much about the war per se. So I did a ton of research. And the more research I did, especially in English, I realized I was just getting an American perspective on the war.
Hmm.
Really wanted a Korean perspective as well, since it was happening in Korea, and my characters were Korean. So I found two books that were instrumental in shaping my knowledge of Korea from the Korean side. And one was the volume one. It's like a 3-inch volume of by Korean Military Institute of the Korea, and it's just called the Korean War Volume One.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so that was almost a day by day account of what happened in the war, both politically and on the ground.
Wow.
Yes.
My son is going to college next year for history, and he loves history books. So I'm definitely going to pick that up for him.
Yeah, it was really hard to find. I don't even know if it's available. I don't know if it's something that I don't remember where I got it, but it was a
Yeah.
gem to find. And then the other book was Remembering the Korean War, Boy Soldier's Story, 1950 to
Wow.
52. Yeah, so that was a memoir by a boy who joined the war, lied about his age, and joined when he was 16
Hmm.
years old.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so that had a lot of the cultural perspective that I needed as well.
Right. Right. Um, yes. This story is so interesting. It shows the power of love, the power of family, the power of secrets that we keep in order to protect each other. What do you hope readers get from this book?
No one's ever asked me that before. That's a very interesting question. Well, the most gratifying things that I've heard that readers have gotten is more knowledge about the war. Uh, the idea that sometimes secrets don't need to be revealed as an act of love,
Hmm.
and uh, it's harder. It might be harder to keep the secret, but it might be ultimately better for all concerned if the secret is kept. And also that that immigration is not always, it's a thorny, complicated issue, and there's always trauma when you are leaving a country, even if it wasn't like my sister's, who was so attached to her family. But there's trauma, there's loss of culture, there's loss
Hmm.
of what was known into the unknown. So there's always going to be some kind of, trauma, whether majorly or minorly, whether it's voluntary or not. That loss is always part of the picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Where can people find the book and find you?
Everywhere. They can find the book everywhere, I'm happy to say.
Great.
It's in all the major bookstores. A lot of the independent bookstores have been carrying it as well. It was very popular with libraries. It was what they call the number one choice for library reads, which is
Wow.
an organization for librarians who will then buy the book and put it on their shelves. And so,
Wonderful.
yeah, so that's really wonderful. So I think it's readily available in the libraries and in the stores. It's also, of course, available online um, from the mega store, whose
Right.
whose name we shall not mention,
It's like Voldemort.
like Voldemort. And And then I'm available. I have a website, eugenia-kim.com, and I'm available for book clubs either by Skype or if it's in my neighborhood, I'll come and visit you. Usually bringing Korean dumplings. And
Wow.
yeah, so yeah, happy
What a
to
treat.
those things. Yeah, I love doing book clubs. They're so much fun.
Okay. So all book clubs, listen up. She'll come to you if you're close by. Um, oh, what are you doing next? What are you working on
Yeah,
another book?
I am working on another book. God help me. Right now, it's in terrible shape, and I have lost complete confidence in it. But I know this is a phase, so
Right.
I know that this too shall pass. But it's about a missionary in Korea. So
Okay.
an American missionary in maybe 1950s. I haven't decided if it's 1950s or 1890s in Korea, and those are big differences.
Oh, they are. They are. Wow. So how long does it usually take you to write a book?
Well, the first one took me 15 years.
Wow.
The second one took me 7, and I'm hoping the third will take me 3.5.
There you go. Cut it down a little bit each time.
That's what
So
I'm.
what took you so long with that first book? Were you just over editing it, or were you putting it aside and walking away from it?
Well, most people who write don't do it full time.
Yeah.
And I had a job. I was a graphic designer, and I had a family and a complicated son. And so all those things made it only possible to write a couple of hours a day
Mm,
or by going away to some writing retreat and writing there. And those
right.
are always easy to get into, or finding a dear friend who had a house who would let me have it at the beach or something for a week.
Yeah.
So that's why it took so long. And also because I had to do a ton of research for The Calligrapher's Daughter because like this one, I knew very little about Korea. I knew
Yeah.
very little about my country of origin. And so I had to do the research on its entire history from the prehistoric times until the Japanese occupation period, to sort of
Wow.
understand how culturally and how geopolitically it was situated in such that the things that happened.
Wonderful. That sounds like an incredible book as well. I have not read that, but I definitely love the way you write.
Thank you.
So I definitely will pick up that book as well.
Thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Is there anything else you would like to tell our listeners?
There's another great Korean American book by Min Jin Lee called Pachinko. If you,
Okay.
it's on the bestseller list. So if you haven't read that, it's about Koreans in Japan during a span of maybe 40, 60 years. Also, so it's another great book, and it's getting lots of great attention.
Oh, great. Awesome. So I will check that out. So again, thank you. If you please go out and pick up the book, The Kinship of Secrets, and also hit Eugenia up. She likes to go to those book clubs.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Pick up The Kinship of Secrets by Eugenia Kim. Inspired by a true story, The Kinship of Secrets is a riveting novel of two sisters, one raised in the United States and the other in South Korea, and the family that bound them together, even as the Korean War kept them apart. I want to thank Eugenia Kim for joining us and sharing her novel, and I want to thank you for joining me on So Many Books, So Little Time. Let me know what books you're reading, what authors I should interview, and give me your suggestions and comments. Make sure you subscribe to So Many Books, So Little Time podcast so that others can find me and all the great indie books and authors that I'll be sharing throughout this podcast. You can join me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at So Many Books, So Little Time podcast. And you can check my website out at jodystapler.com or email us at somanybookspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for joining me, and come back next week when we delve into another story.